Morning, everybody. If people are still filtering in, we will get started in just a second. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started this morning. I want to thank everybody for joining us for our second webinar of 2026. I'm Charlie Oakley, an AICP certified planner with 23 years of experience. 23 years experience in land development in the Triangle and Greater Southeast region. I am principal and founder of Yoakley Entitlement Services and co-founder and president of NoTS. The topics of today's webinar is the title. If you're not modeling political risk in your pro forma is a guess. And we're going to prove that in the next 30 minutes with one case study you probably heard of and a data set you probably haven't seen. So a quick word about who we are and what we do before we get into the presentation. Yoakley Entitlement Services is an entitlement consulting firm. We specialize in navigating the zoning, subdivision, and site plan approval processes. We work with builders, developers, landowners, brokers, engineers, and attorneys, basically anybody who needs to get a project through the approval process. We've got experience on both the public and private side of entitlement work, so we understand what staff is looking for and what boards are reacting to. We can also plug into builder and developer teams as a fractional entitlement resource. So if you don't have in-house entitlement staff or don't need a full-time entitlement staff, we can fill that role. And for early stage screening, we have our reporting products not powered by NoTS that flag major entitlement risks on site before you commit time or capital, and those can be tailored to your project. NoTS is our municipal intelligence platform. It's a database that aggregates political meeting records and census data across more than 200 municipalities and growing. This allows us to spend a few hours searching a database instead of spending weeks pulling meeting minutes and reading ordinances. The findings I'm presenting today come directly from that platform. So that's the background. Let's get into the study. So November 19th, 2024, the Tampa Bay Rays sent a one-page letter to the city of St. Petersburg, Florida. That letter triggered three separate termination events in the development agreement. One letter, 3 kill shots, a $6 billion deal that had been approved by city council 4 months earlier, was dead. Everybody acted shocked, but nobody should have been. Every warning was in the public record. Citizens said it at open mic. A council member interrogated the contract and got unknown and not available back. The team owner issued an explicit ultimatum at opening day 2023. None of it was hidden. It just wasn't synthesized. So quick context on this. The deal didn't come together overnight, obviously. The Tampa Bay Rays have been in St. Petersburg for quite a while, and the Rays and the Hines Development Company first proposed redeveloping the gas plant district in 2007. The same cast of characters, same developer, and same vision. 17 years later, they were still trying to make it work. The intervening years saw false starts. The Rays explored Tampa and Hillsborough County. They floated a split season plan, half in St. Pete, half in Montreal, and the Major League Baseball rejected that. Then Mayor Kreisman issued an RFP to redevelop Tropicana Field without the Rays. Council pushed back. They passed a unanimous resolution, settle the baseball question first, then redevelop. When Ken Welch took office, he issued a new RFP. In January 2023, he selected the Rays Hines team. The vision was a $6 billion redevelopment of the gas plant district paired with a new stadium. The mayor said it was a day that had been more than 40 years in the making. By July 2024, council approved the agreements. One council member said that it would change the region, our city, and the county for better for years to come. The governor endorsed it. Major League Baseball commissioner endorsed it. Everybody seemed aligned. Smart people with lawyers and consultants believe this deal was solid. The governor of Florida stood up and said, I think it's going to be great for the community. That's what makes this instructive, because certainty is not a risk model. So what went wrong? The short answer is nothing that wasn't predictable. We indexed over 2,000 political meeting chunks mentioning the Tampa Bay raise across 5 Tampa Bay municipalities. The pattern was clear. 3 categories of warning, all in the public record, all ignored. Warning 1 was the leverage signal. On opening day 2023, Stu Sternberg, owner of the Rays, stood up and said he expected a stadium deal by the end of the year, either with St. Pete or Tampa. He then issued what public commenters described as a veiled threat that if a stadium deal wasn't consummated, look out. He's free to move the team wherever he wants to the highest bidder. That's not a negotiation, that's an ultimatum, and it was delivered publicly on opening day with cameras rolling. Now translate that into what it means if you're actually in the room. When someone says, we'll go to Tampa if this doesn't close, that's not posturing, that's leverage creation. It tells you they are negotiating a deal, and you're negotiating against the clock you don't control. And the person on the other side of the table just told you publicly that they have a better offer. In a private deal, that changes every turn. In a public deal, it should change every assumption in the model, but nobody adjusted. Citizens at Open Mic connected some dots. According to Forbes, Sternberg's group bought the Rays for $175 million. By 2023, the franchise was worth $1.8 billion. A 10 times return on investment. A 10-time return on investment while demanding a publicly funded stadium. One speaker put it this way: rather than make veiled threats, Mr. Sternberg should be apologizing to this fair, world-recognized city, because by any measure, the Rays have been a phenomenal investment and its success to a very large part due to this community's support. Another resident didn't mince words. Anyone on council who supported buying him a stadium through every obvious red flag willingly torched your ethics, integrity, and reputation. Voters will absolutely remember the endless fawning speeches about Mr. Sternberg and the attempted rebranding of him as a valued community partner instead of exactly what he has consistently shown himself to be. That's in the public record, and that's a citizen delivering a risk assessment at a microphone, and his timestamp months before the deal collapsed. Warning 2, and this is one you should remember. Council member Lisette Hanowitz did something rare. She read the contract and asked questions on the record. Who controls the development? Unknown. What's their financial capacity? Not available. Does the council have approval rights if the ownership transfers? No. Can Sternberg keep control of the development even after selling the team? Yes. Is Hines, the developer everyone celebrated, guaranteed to be involved? No. And the mayor's statement that no property taxes would fund this? Not true. 50% of the CRA, the local TIF district, property taxes will be diverted for 30 years for a total of around $700 million. Every one of those answers came from the city's attorney on the record in committee. This wasn't investigative journalism. It was one council member reading the contract and asking questions nobody else had. Now sit with that for a second. If you saw this on one of your deals, unknown ownership, no financials, no approval rights on transfers, you wouldn't wire a deposit. You probably wouldn't get past the first page of the operating agreement. But here's a public deal with a $6 billion price tag, and the city's attorney was answering unknown and not available to basic due diligence questions on the record. And there's another kicker. The agreement was structured so that Sternberg could sell the team, pocket $1.8 billion, and maintain control of the development partnership. The transfer could happen at any time, and the city would have no say. So again, put yourself in the shoes of the developer on the other side of that deal. You're building your project around a partner who can change ownership without telling you, whose financial capacity is not available, and who has no contractual obligation to keep the developer you thought you were partnering with. That's not a partnership. That's an option contract dressed up as a civic celebration. Warning 3, the regional signal. While St. Pete was negotiating the deal, Tampa was negotiating leverage. In June 23, a Tampa council member said publicly, on the record, get the raise over here. That's not idle talk. That's a competing bid announced at a microphone. 3 years later, Tampa is setting aside formal time for a stadium pitch. Sternberg didn't just have an ultimatum, he had an alternative. And it was all in the public record of a city 30 minutes away, and nobody in St. Pete, on the St. Pete side, synthesized the two. So I want to pause on who was saying these things and questioning this deal. These aren't journalists, and these aren't analysts. They're not consultants being paid to find risk. These are residents showing up to city council at 7 p.m. on a Thursday, standing at a podium and delivering warnings that would prove precedent. One speaker said, these guys sit here and threaten to extort the taxpayers. Stu Sternberg is sitting there watching his stock ticker go up. Another, after hurricanes hit, pointed out a $1 billion company with no allegiance to St. Pete gets millions to fix its private stadium, while FEMA and insurance companies deny our claims. After the collapse, one speaker captured the whole arc. Hundreds of us stood up here, speaking to officials and committees over the months, repeating facts again and again. They listed the pattern. Publicly financed stadiums don't deliver, a natural disaster was overdue, and the owner had proved himself nothing, quote, but a greedy, arrogant bully, unquote. Their words on the record. And the price tag for ignoring all that? The public almost had to pay almost $2 billion for the lesson. That's the institutional memory problem. The warnings were delivered, the record captured them, but nobody synthesized them into their risk model. Sorry. So, you're thinking, Charlie, that's a great story, but I'm not building a $6 billion stadium, dude. I'm doing a 200 lot subdivision in Leander, Texas, or Holly Springs, North Carolina, or somewhere in Florida. So it's a different world. But is it really? We recently published a report called the New Home Construction Momentum Index, and not everybody who signed up for the webinar will get a link to that report at the end of this. Using the data in that report, Yes published a LinkedIn newsletter edition called The Cost of Yes. We indexed approval conditions across 22 green light municipalities, across the 22 green light municipalities in the Momentum Index, places where the political environment says yes. Every single one of those municipalities attached an average of 10 and a half distinct condition types to residential approvals. 54 turn lane requirements and 150,000 to 450,000 apiece. 69 landscape buffers that were above what code required. Code sets the floor, the approval sets the actual number. 34 instances of offsite infrastructure at developer's expense. And the phrase at no cost to the city appeared 33 times across these transcripts in 2025. Every instance is a cost that's transferred to your budget. So let's give you some specific examples. Melissa, Texas. Zero opposition in the political record. 20% of the housing stock built since 2020. Green light by every measure. But the approval conditions include a 14-acre park dedication at no cost to the city. That's not in the code, it's in the transcript. Leander, Texas. Annexation and single-family residential zoning flowing smoothly. Staff says the proposal does comply with the comprehensive plan. But there's a Texas DOT permit for a turn lane that was submitted in August 2024, still pending. Your land contract assumed a 12-month entitlement cycle. Texas DOT doesn't care. Surprise, Arizona, one of the most developer-friendly markets in the data set. Development agreements are flowing. But council stipulated a 150-foot landscape buffer on a residential approval. The code said nothing close to that. The developer drew to the code. The approval came back with a larger setback. The delta between code and approval, that's the gap most pro formas don't model. So here's a visual. Just roughly, here's what a typical pro forma looks like on political risk. There's $0, no line item, no contingency, no adjustment. We typically just bury it in the overall contingency in the budget and hope it covers what we expect is coming once we get to the public process. But if you look at the transcript when you put together your pro forma, here's what was actually said for one project. Turn lane, $300,000. Buffer upgrade above code, $90,000. Park dedication, $900,000. Tree mitigation, $400,000. That's 1.6 million in costs that were in the public record before the contract was signed, and none of that was in the model. This is a pattern, a real pattern that we see. And here's how it happens. And if you've been through this process, you know this is how it happens. You get a sketch done to code, you underwrite your site to code, you model your setbacks, your density, your infrastructure cost based on what the ordinance says, and you put some contingency in the budget that you hope will cover everything that happens once you get into the review process. Then you go to the hearing, and the hearing adds conditions. A turn lane the traffic study didn't require, but the council members' constituents have been complaining about for years. A buffer that's twice what code requires because the adjacent neighborhood showed up again. A park dedication that wasn't in development standards but got negotiated in as council approval because council's been talking about, we need a park over here, even though it's not in a plan. Now you're past your feasibility deadline. Your land contract doesn't have a retrade clause for political conditions. Your equity partner unwrote the deal based on the code, not the transcript, and the margin you modeled just evaporated in the conditions that were, and I cannot stress this enough, already visible in the last 3 approvals in that jurisdiction. None of these should be surprises. They were already in the transcript. And that's one project. Multiply that across your portfolio. If you're running 10 sites and each one even has $500,000 in unmodeled political conditions, that's $5 million and you didn't see coming. And that's the difference between a profitable quarter and a capital call. So what goes into the political risk model? 5 things. 1 is opposition signal density. How many comments are hostile versus supportive in this market for this product type or use? 2, condition stacking patterns. What conditions got added to the last comparable approvals and what did they cost? 3, timeline risk. What's the actual cycle time versus what your land contract assumed? Leander, Texas example, still waiting on the Texas DOT permit submitted in 2024. 4, regional competition. Is the municipality next door making it easier or harder, or is the whole region a development buzzsaw? 5, the gap between code and approval, like in Surprise, Arizona, where council approved a buffer of 150 feet, where the code had nothing close to that. And here's what this looks like operationally. Before you go to a contract, we look at the last 10 approvals in that jurisdiction, extract every condition for that type of use. Turn lanes, buffers, dedications, offsite improvement, phasing improvements, all of it. We model that, and that becomes part of your real budget, not the ordinance, not the staff report, the actual conditions that get attached to projects like yours in that jurisdiction. That's the number that belongs in your pro forma. And none of these are unknowable. It's just unmodeled. So for NODS, we have indexed over 62,000 meetings across 200 municipalities in 24 states, 2.3 million meeting transcripts, every condition, every opposition comment, every approval pattern, searched, quantified, and classified. To give you a sense of how deep this goes, we can tell you that Build to Rent is a political flashpoint in Texas. Roulette, Waxahachie, and Pearland all showed organized opposition. Salina has codified equal impact fees to BTR to eliminate any fee advantage. But in Arizona, BTR is accepted as part of the product, as part of the product mix. Buckeye explicitly lists Build to Rent alongside townhomes and multifamily in its growth narrative. Same product type, completely different political reception, 30 minutes of reading apart. If you're a BTR operator, you're not checking the political record before you pick a market, you're flying blind. And here's what we can actually build for our clients. At the market level, something like the Momentum Index tells you which municipalities are green light, yellow light, or red light for your product type or use, with the transcript evidence behind every rating. We publish that as a standing report, and you saw data from that today. And we can publish those for any use, any segment in land development. At the site level, before you close on a parcel, we run what we call a quick check. These are preliminary due diligence reports that are 15 to 20 pages, mapping zoning, utilities, and environmental constraints and projected yield against the political record. What did the last 3 comparable projects get conditioned with? What was the opposition density? What was the actual entitlement timeline versus what your contract assumes? That's what the report that turns one. That's the report that turns 1.69 million into unmodeled costs. Sorry, that's the report that turns 1.69 million dollars in unmodeled costs into a line item you can negotiate around. For active entitlements, rezonings, conditional use zonings, variances, we can build full strategy reports, political navigation, condition stacking analysis, opposition mapping, and recommended approaches. We've done this for projects across North Carolina, Florida, California, and Tennessee, every one of them using the same underlying data you saw today. And for the operators who want ongoing intelligence, we published 2 LinkedIn newsletters, the Entitlements Weather Report and the Yes Approval Index. The cost of yes data that I showed you earlier, that came from the newsletters. We can also publish monthly updates or regular updates on any market you might be interested in. Just reach out to us and let us know, and we can provide that data. Market level data tells you where the door is open. Site level analysis, like a quick check, tells you what's on the other side. And the ongoing intelligence and monitoring makes sure that the door doesn't close on you after you've already signed the contract. The raise had over 2,000 warning chunks across 5 municipalities. Nobody connected them. That same data is sitting in the public record for your next site. The question is whether you read it before you close. A $6 billion deal collapsed because the warnings were captured. The warnings were scattered across hundreds of documents that nobody synthesized. Citizens stood at the podium and said it was coming. A council member read the contract and found holes you could drive a stadium through. A competing city was publicly courting the team. The news covered none of it until after the fact. Your $5 million land contract has the same problem at a different scale. The conditions are in the transcript. The opposition patterns are in the public comment. The timeline risks are in the agenda items that keep getting continued. The information is there. It's just not in your pro forma. And if you want it to be in your pro forma, give us a call and we can help you model that risk. Thank you for joining us today. Be on the lookout for any emails, for an email containing the presentation and report.